morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Many of us actually use or think of our era as described by the era of innovation, exploration, and the spread of knowledge with social media and everything else. But exactly those three words were used to describe an era 500 years ago. This was the Renaissance, which came after the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages of half a millennium ago. And it left us a legacy, among many, Leonardo da Vinci. And next year, we are celebrating 500 years of his death. And he was, by bar none, the father of innovation, exploration, and spread of knowledge of his era. So I would like to make this presentation a tribute to him, not because he was a man, but because of the fact that he was a genius, a self-made genius, completely based on his intellect. And it is important in life that we learn from history, and we emulate success stories, and his was one of them. So I would like to invite you to be lost in thoughts, in deep thoughts, at the irony of the experience we are living today with the experience that we were living 500 years ago. Many say we are in the dawn of a new era, the dawn of the digital era. And this era invites us to believe in the multiverse theory, the theory that we humans are living in multiple universes at the same time. And if this is true, we are both living the physical world, the physical universe, our universe, and we are experiencing the digital universe of which we have full control. And if that is the case, in that digital universe, there is a galaxy, the analytics galaxy, and in that galaxy there is a system very similar to the solar system, but instead of the sun, the data is the center of the universe, and that universe, just like ours, is actually played and ruled by forces. And we are going to call these the technology forces, and we are going to become an explorer of this digital universe, very much like Leonardo da Vinci was an explorer of our physical universe 500 years ago. Let's start with what is called AI, ML, DL. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. The AI started about 50 years ago, or in the 50s, I would say, and the purpose of artificial intelligence at that time, the killer app, as we would call it today, was to play chess. And the idea was to see if technology could be used to emulate human behavior. Now, please pay attention, there was no artificial learning or no learning intelligence, so the word learning didn't come up. The idea was to have technology emulate some actions that we take for granted, such as playing chess. And why did we choose chess? For one simple reason, we understood the rules of the game, and we could express those rules of the game in programming. And we could say, hey, as a well-defined board with well-defined pieces, we understand the moves that those pieces make, and we understand what it takes to win. What we did not have at the time was the ability to compute in real time or near real time all the possibilities of the board, and then decide what was the next best move. Then the years came along, and another phenomena actually became available, which was machine learning in the early 2000s. Now, believe me, the concepts existed many years ago, but they became viable, and that's one word that we are going to learn today. We are in the area of viability, and I will come to that later, with machine learning. Now, the killer app was predictive analytics. How many of you have seen the movie Minority Report? Very happy, this has absolutely nothing to do with it. So predictive maintenance is about actually learning from history. If I understand some input conditions and I understand the output conditions, then I can actually model the behavior of a system. And you can model the behavior of a system with a line here. And then when you see new upcoming situations emerging, you can predict the potential outcome. Then after that, came deep learning. Deep learning became popular in the year 2012 because, again, some of the concepts that we had defined many, many decades ago became viable. The killer app now is to do activities that we humans take for granted, but we have absolutely no idea how we actually do them, which is completely the opposite of playing chess. The idea here is how we recognize the face of our parents. I don't know about you, but thank God I had a very, very strong mother, and I could recognize her face by her breathing in a room dark. And how do we actually make that happen? We don't know. However, we want to teach the computers how to do the same. So what technique have we used? We have decided that if we cannot tell the computer how to recognize a face, we teach them how to recognize patterns and shapes, and then they create a model, and from that point on, when they see similar shapes, they can do classification, and they can do image recognition, such as in a social media. And there is a lot of argument saying, look, maybe image recognition and deciding whether or not you are human or a bicycle is only important in social media. Absolutely not. Autonomous driving is coming to a street near you, and autonomous driving will use the same image recognition mechanisms to actually decide whether they should prioritize hitting something in front of it or actually braking and causing an accident with the car behind it based on whether or not there is human or live presence. So this is actually a huge shift. And this is changing how technology is done. So if you actually look at the workflow that we have today, a data scientist designs a model, and once that model gets designed, the model is actually going to be trained. Once trained, it is applied or put in production. Now, what we have seen here is that when it actually started, these were 3 sequential steps. You would design a model, you would train a model, you would deploy a model. And what we are seeing is more of a facet of agile programming in analytics. You are training and bringing a model into production and designing a new one, all of it at the same time. And we are going to accelerate in that way the speed of innovation and the speed of technology, which is extremely exciting. And if you actually look at what model training does, I apologize for the animation here, first you actually feed into the model label data. You say face, no face, face, no face. The model gets trained, and then from that point on, when you deploy the model, you can put images, and the model will tell you it is a face or not a face, or coin or not coin, or whatever you decide, and you can actually apply the results back into the model training for reinforcement. Why am I taking the time to explain that to you? Because as we are in deep thoughts, in AI, ML, DL, the rules of the game have changed on us. The principles of machine learning and deep learning, they have been around for decades. They have only become viable now. It is our time, it's the Renaissance time, it's the Enlightenment phase, it's whatever positive acronym you can come up with, and the moment is ours. Andrew Ng, who is considered the father of the modern deep learning, he actually drew this graph, and he said, look, the more data you have, the better accuracy you have up to a certain point. Meaning that there is a point at which, if you're actually using only AI and machine learning, that there is no more advantage at all to keep on learning, to collect more data, or to train the model further, because you actually have reached a plateau with some algorithms. But then, if you actually look, for example, in machine learning, after you represent a model with a line, you have learned enough, and you can stop learning. However, with deep learning, the situation is different. The more data that you use to train the model, the better accuracy you have. And then you ask the question, when should I stop learning? Right after never. Because the more data you have, the better, the more you learn. And then after a certain point, he also said there are three types of, or several types of models to be trained. You can have a simple, medium, or large, or more and more complex. And the more complex model you have, the more learning that you actually do. Which brings us to what we are calling the dimensions of scale. In other words, AI, machine learning, deep learning specifically, has become to age now because of the combination that now we can design more and more complex models, we can train those models in larger and larger data sets, and we have the compute capacity to train and deploy those models in real time. Which leads us to what we call the unreasonable effect of scale, or the unreasonable effect of continuous scale. And if you look at the need for data, where is that data coming from? It's coming from, in large part, by the Internet of Things. And what is a thing? A thing is defined by the 3 C's: the need to acquire or create context via sensors and actuators, the need to compute, and the need to connect. And they are going to come in many. There will be about 1 trillion of them coming in a theater near you, and they will change forever how we perceive and communicate. So as you get deep into the Internet of Things, it is a major force to create a digital image of the physical world, and it is also going to be how we connect the physical world with the digital universe. Then, how are we going to experience this digital universe? Via augmented reality and virtual reality. Virtual reality is not new, but it became popular just recently. Similarly, augmented reality is not new, but it becomes very popular with this game. Which game was that? Don't tell me you didn't play. It's Pokemon Go. And why is augmented reality and virtual reality so important to us? Because it will give us an experience of immersion. We are going to no longer be victims of what is called the director's point of view, or the director's image. We are going to have a degree of freedom of what part of the image we want to look at, and we are going to have a degree of freedom to how to react and interact with that environment in many ways, shape, or form. Because of that, 4 things are going to transform how we do businesses and how we live in our daily lives. We are going to have a reality which is much richer. We are going to have this impression of full immersion. We are going to be able to interact and influence with our surroundings. But more importantly, we are going to have experiential presence. So the moment that actually an interaction with technology touches not only our minds, but our hearts, we will forever remember them. And it is going to change the workforce, it's going to change marketing, it's going to change how we interact with our world. And it is going to give us the connection between the digital and the physical universe. And if we go to explore the digital universe, we have to mind the natives. The natives are the robots that actually are a system of things, of Internet of Things. They compute, they connect, and they actually have motion or locomotion most of the time. And they have evolved from the industrial age, where they had to be fenced in, they had no sensors, and they could be interpreted as dangerous, to something that is much more social and interactive. And so as a result, some of the repetitive, monotonous tasks are actually being outsourced by us to the natives, and we are going to focus on a much more value-added activities. So many people say that robots are not replacing humans at all. Instead, we humans have been filling in for robots until they became viable. For some of the tasks that we do today, in fact, we were never meant to be. And this is going to bring a human-machine partnership. And of course, there is the notion of the accelerators. We are all familiar with the CPU, but also computing games and virtual reality, augmented reality created new processing capacity, which is changing the velocity at which we want to do computation, and it is changing the shape of the data centers that is going to look much more exciting today. And processing will be everywhere. You know the song, Who Let the Dogs Out? In technology, we sing, Who Let the Cores Out? And they are everywhere creating what is called a continuum. Over time, we actually have changed the architecture from centralized to decentralized. When the cloud came about, we decided that's the end. We don't need anything else. Cloud is the solution. CIO stood for your career is over. And yet, if we are driving a car and we actually see a deer in front of us, and we have to go to the cloud to make a decision on whether or not we should brake, we know what we are going to have for dinner, right? So then came IoT and the Internet of Things, and then you started needing to collect information closer at the data source, and you need to make decisions. So what is the right answer? In the new era, should we go centralized or should we go centralized? If we go centralized, then we have to find a way of actually bringing all the information to a central location to train models and to do inference. But there are regulatory compliance that dictates how data should move. There are bandwidth constraints and security, etc. If we go all decentralized, then we have to learn how we are going to deal with the continuum that is now called the edge, the mist, the fog, and the cloud. And yet, if we actually take an X-ray, we see that there is data everywhere. There is computing capacity everywhere. So how can you actually find a moderate solution? You know, Tiano was one of the geniuses of math, and she created this notion of a moderated golden mean, meaning that you should be able to do computing as close as possible to the data source, and yet communicate the results to achieve a higher order learning. So as we go along, I wanted to make the point that there will be modes of computation that are centralized, decentralized, and federated, and there will be a need to orchestrate and coordinate that power, which will drive the need to blockchain, which will drive also improvements on 5G and improvements on quantum computing. The point I'm trying to make is that this is the most exciting time in technology and science. There are technology forces everywhere. And if you actually look at Leonardo da Vinci, there are 4 quotes that came in his biography recently that I would like to share with you. Number 1, he was a man without letters, born out of the wedlock. He didn't have access to school, so he was self-taught. He could barely read and write in Latin. He actually wanted to know everything that was known to be known, and he considered himself a disciple of experience and experiment. He had a reverence for the patterns of nature in life, very much like we are doing with AI. And he believed that information, science, and technology should inform you, but not limit you, not define you. In that perspective, he wrote a job application. If you were Leonardo da Vinci, maybe you would consider yourself a painter. You would say, I painted the Mona Lisa. At the time he had not, but let's say I could paint the Mona Lisa, I could paint the Last Supper. Instead, painting came up on the 11th paragraph of his job application. And then he said, like everything else in painting, I can do everything possible. Let's make ourselves the geniuses that we can paint the Mona Lisa and we can paint the Last Supper and come up as the 11th qualification in our CV. He actually had a combination of science, engineering, and art, and he was one of the history's most creative geniuses. Ladies and gentlemen, an anonymous source said there are 3 types of people on earth. People that make it happen, people that watch it happen, and people that have absolutely no idea what the heck happened. And I actually encourage you to actually think very, very hard of how you wanted to be remembered or how you want to define yourself in this new era. According to the Bible, God created man to its own image. we have to be very, very careful because we are creating the digital universe across as our own image, and we have to decide with each image of ourselves we want to do that. In this dawn of a new era, let's use the unbounded, unlimited creativity that technology gives us, and together, Technograph, reimagine our future. Because together, only together, we can change the world. Thank you very much. Enjoy the day.